Hi. This is a very different video than what I normally post. I normally do the sign language videos and sign language interpretations, so this is completely different. You are actually hearing me speak. Oh, that's scary. For those of you who don't know, I deal with severe anxiety, so for me to be posting like this and to be speaking to you all like this is huge for me. I don't normally do stuff like this. The reason I wanted to change it up, I have been watching a lot of videos on YouTube about different women and their fertility journeys. And it's really helped me through my fertility journey lately. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And I've been thinking about it like crazy lately because this is, very different for me. It's very huge. And for me, at least, to, be putting myself out there like this. And so it's taken a lot of thought. But I've just decided I wanted to do it. So here we go. Yeah. So since this is just the first video, I will just do a recap of everything we've gone through so far. So sit tight. It's gonna be a long video, I'm sure. Yeah, sorry. I'm very awkward just looking at the camera like this. Yeah, so here we go. So my husband and I we got married. Let's start there. We got married close to 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in July. We got married July 16th, 2019. So we're just over a year and a half now. We started trying shortly after. Sorry, trying to recall it all. I got my IUD taken out a few months after our wedding, because we wanted to start trying. It was a Mirena or Skyla or something like that. It was a 2-year IUD, so it was about to expire anyway. I believe it expired 4 or 5 months after our wedding, but I got it taken out a little before that. I just did not want to deal with it anymore. I was having a lot of hormonal problems on it, which we'll get to, but yeah, I just did not want to be on it anymore, and we wanted to start trying to get pregnant, so I got it taken out. Now, if you don't know, an IUD, they say you can get pregnant right away. Some women ovulate once they get off it and get pregnant right away, and it's all fine and dandy. But they do say it takes 3 to 6 months on any birth control, not just an IUD, on any birth control. Once you come off it, it takes 3 to 6 months to kind of re-regulate your cycles, and all that. So, I was prepped for that once I came off it. I'm like, yeah, if I get pregnant right away, that'd be great, but it's probably not going to happen. However, when I did come off it, I did start getting a lot of pregnancy symptoms shortly after. I had nausea and mood swings and tenderness and cravings and, all sorts of symptoms. And so, I thought, hey, I'm one of those women who got pregnant right off the IUD. That's fantastic. That happened so fast. Like, I'm already pregnant. Like, this is going great. Going exactly how we wanted it to, more or less. And then my period showed up a couple weeks after I got my IUD taken out. And it was a very depressing time for me. Like, that whole week I was just down in the dumps because I really thought I really felt like I was. And I wasn't that lucky, and it just didn't happen that way. And that's fine. Like, I got past it. I didn't live in that depression for too long, but I did have my moment to grieve. Woo. Sorry. We'll see if I cut that out or not. Probably not. I'm lazy. But yeah, I got my period right away, and it was a totally normal period, normal flow, normal duration, normal for me. It's not normal for everybody, and I'm learning that more and more now. But at the time, it was a normal period for me. So, I got past that, and all was fine and dandy. But after that, I did not have another period for 4.5 months, I believe. And, it was kind of freaking me out. Like, they do say 3 to 6 months to re-regulate, not 3 to 6 months to have a period. And so it was just kind of freaking me out. And so I called my OBGYN on month 3. I was like, hey, something's wrong. Like, I got to come in and figure it out. And she's like, okay, we'll get you in as soon as possible. Well, it wasn't. They didn't have availability for me that also worked on with my work schedule for like a month and a half. So that was fine. But I went when they could fit me in. And the day before my appointment, my period started. And so that was fun, because one of the first things they wanted to do when I went in was take a pregnancy test. And I'm like, no, I'm not pregnant. Like, I know I'm not. It started yesterday, and again, it was totally normal for me. Like, I knew it right away that it was completely normal, and it was not pregnancy spotting or anything like that. It was my full-on period. And so we talked. I can't remember fully what we talked about, but she was essentially just, hey, give it, a couple more months and we'll see if it re-regulates. If you want, you can track ovulation. Oh, no, I do remember that part. I was tracking ovulation for those 4.5 months, and I did not get one single positive ovulation test that entire time, and I did not ovulate. And so I did tell her about that, and she's like, well, you probably ovulated before this period started and just didn't catch it, and that's fine, but if you want to keep tracking them, go ahead, and we'll meet back in a couple months. Like, your period started, you should be good now. Like, you should start up as normal again. I'm like, okay. So I went home. Now, keep in mind, I have never, ever had regular cycles. I started super late for, a woman. I didn't start fully until I was 17. And that is very, very late. Most people start between 10 and 13. And I didn't start till 17, which is mind-blowing. Like, how long that is. I was a senior in high school. And so I never had regular cycles, never any of that. And so when she told me I would re-regulate, I didn't think much of it. I'm like, oh, okay, like, I've never had regular cycles, so, we'll go back to that regular. That's fine. Well, I didn't track ovulation too much because she said that everything should go back to normal. Like, if I have periods, then I'm most likely ovulating. And she was right that after that one period, I did start having them again. Like, I didn't go another, 4 or 5 months without one. But the thing is, I went 2 months plus without them every single time. I think my shortest cycle is period day 1 to period day 1. So it's not like a period length. It's from the start of one to the start of the next. And so my shortest cycle, I believe, was 52 days. They're supposed to be around 28. And so I had almost twice as long of a cycle as you're supposed to have. And that was my shortest. My longest were upwards of 60, 70 days. And so I called my OB after, I think, the third one. I work in 3s, apparently. But the third one of that length. And I'm like, hey, something's wrong. And at this point, so I did end up calling her because I went through another point where I really thought I was pregnant. I took pregnancy test after pregnancy test, and they all came back negative, but I also did research on what's called a cryptic pregnancy. And that's essentially where you are pregnant, but you're not showing the chemical that pregnancy tests look for. And that's called HCG. And so I read about them, and, you know, they're extremely rare, but crazier things have happened, you know? So I'm like, well, maybe that's what's happening, because I was having all the pregnancy symptoms again. And, you know, I think that was my longest one, where it was like 68 days, I think it got to. Or maybe it was longer than that, I don't fully remember. But, you know, it was one of my longest ones since I came off this IUD. And so I thought I was pregnant. And so I called my doctor, and I'm like, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. She's like, great. Well, have you taken a positive pregnancy test? I'm like, well, no. She's like, well, you're probably not pregnant then. I'm like, I know, but I want to come in and get tested. So we scheduled a time for me to come in and talk to her and, you know, see where we're at, just because I wasn't testing positive. She wanted to talk to me about it and everything. I'm like, okay. And then again, right before my appointment, my period started. And it was really depressing. Again. Because I, again, really thought I was pregnant. Like, my brother-in-law was living with us at this point. And, you know, I wanted to keep it a surprise for my husband, because I wanted to surprise him when we got pregnant. Like, I had this whole thing planned out of how I was going to surprise him. And so he didn't know anything about it. But my brother-in-law was living with us at the time, and he had caught me buying pregnancy tests, because I was still testing over and over again, because I'm like, dude, I'm pregnant. Like, I feel it. I'm pretty sure I am. Like, I don't know what else would be going on. I feel like I'm pregnant. And so he caught me buying pregnancy tests. And so I ended up using him as like my space to talk about it. And he was really great. He was really supportive. He was so happy for us, and he was looking into cryptic pregnancies with me, and it was great. And then I got my period after he moved out and found out I'm not pregnant. Sorry, it's still really hard for me to think about stuff like that, I guess. And so at the same time, a coworker of mine and a really good friend of mine also thought she was pregnant, and she was getting positive pregnancy tests, but not super positive. She had like faint lines on all of them, but they had color. Like, they were definitely positive. They were just really faint positives. And she went and got blood work done, and, you know, ultrasounds and all that stuff, and it came back that she wasn't pregnant. And we still don't know why she was showing positive tests, but yeah. So when she got the ultrasound done, they asked her, have you ever been diagnosed with PCOS before? And she's like, well, no. Like, is that what I have? And the ultrasound tech, of course, told her, like, you know, I can't diagnose that. I'm just saying that's kind of what it looks like. And she's like, okay. Well, then she told me about it, and we started looking into PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. And we both matched a lot of the symptoms and side effects of PCOS. And so she went back and got diagnosed by the same doctor. They came back with all her blood tests and everything, and they're like, yeah, you have it. And she's like, oh, okay. And she dealt with it, you know, well, the same cycle. When my period showed up, I was pretty convinced that I had it as well, because I was showing a lot of the same symptoms as her and a lot of different symptoms, but that still went along with PCOS. And so I'm like, you know what, I have it. And so I called my doctor back. I'm like, hey, we don't have to talk about possible pregnancy anymore. I'm like, I'm not pregnant. My period showed up. But here's what I want to do. I want to test for PCOS. Like, I told her straight up, or the receptionist, I guess, this whole time I've been talking to the receptionist, not directly to her, but I told her, I'm like, I want to get diagnosed. I want to get tested. Like, if I don't have it, fine, but I need to know. Like, this is getting out of hand, how bad my cycles have been lately, and, you know, I keep thinking I'm pregnant when I'm not, and I just want to figure out what's going on. So I went in, and she talked to me, and she's like, well, why do you think you have PCOS? And I told her, you know, my cycles since I came off the IUD have been incredibly irregular. I told her how irregular, how long my cycles were. And then I told her about before I got the IUD inserted. So before I got the IUD, I already told you I didn't start until I was 17. Well, technically I started at 16, but the whole year I had it only twice. And that's not right. You know, you're supposed to have it every month, and I had it twice in an entire year. And when I turned 17, I say that's when I started, only because I had it more than twice, but it still wasn't all that much. I had it 3 or 4 times, maybe five tops that whole year. And like, I had super long cycles, and you know, I'm finding out that my periods are way longer than everyone else. I have 8 to 9 day periods, and most people have like 5-6 day periods. And so I'm finding out that I'm bleeding for way longer than everyone else, and that's crazy. So I was telling her all of this and some of the hormonal problems I've been having. You know, I have unwanted hair growth. You know, around here I have other places of hair growth that's not right. I've had problems with acne. Like, I have all these things that go along with PCOS. And one of the biggest things with PCOS is weight gain and diabetes. And, you know, I was so afraid she wouldn't consider me a PCOS patient because I don't have diabetes. I've never been overweight, and that's not me like bragging. Like, I've just, I don't know, I just never dealt with that. Like, I've had trouble keeping weight on a good chunk of my life. Like, I'm just now getting to a point where I can't keep weight on, and that's been, you know, my struggle. And so I was so afraid that she wouldn't diagnose me with PCOS because of me not having a weight problem, because that's one of the biggest things. Like, if you look up PCOS, you find PCOS diets, like diets and exercises and all these things to lose weight and kill diabetes, or not kill diabetes, but, you know, like, help with that kind of stuff. And one of the biggest meds that they give you when you get diagnosed with PCOS is metformin, and that's insulin resistance, which also goes along with diabetes. And so I was so afraid, you know, like I don't know what else is wrong with me. I have been doing so much research on things that cause irregular periods. Like, the more I find out that about what I have that goes along with PCOS, I started looking for other things that cause all these things, because the biggest thing with PCOS is weight gain, and I didn't have that. So I started looking into endometriosis and like all these other things, but I didn't align with any of them as much as I aligned with PCOS. And so I'm like, no, I'm positive that's what I have. And so I was talking to her about, to my OBGYN, about all these things that, you know, I've dealt with, and all the hormonal problems I've had on all the different birth controls I've been on. I was on the pills, I had the IUD, and like, it just made my periods and my cycles and my emotions, all of it, it just made it all worse. And so I hated birth control. Like, we put me on the birth control pills initially to regulate my periods, and it messed me up so much. Like, I can't even tell you the extent it did. Like, my periods hurt way more than they ever did. And I'm not talking just cramping. Like, it hurt when I bled. And, like, it hurt when I did all these other things. And, you know, I was so messed up because of these birth controls. And that's another reason I went on the IUD, because I initially chose the one that had no hormones in it, because I had so many problems with all these hormones. And I went to, I did not go to my OBGYN to get the IUD. I went to, I forget what it's called, my normal doctor, my practitioner, whatever it's called, my normal doctor, because I had been more comfortable with her at the time, because I had just seen her for a physical. I think that was my only reasoning, is I had just seen her for a physical, and so I felt more comfortable with her for that reason. And so I went to her to get my IUD, and I specifically chose, there's different types of IUDs, and there's one that doesn't have hormones in it. It uses copper instead of hormones, and I chose that one specifically because I knew how bad hormones affected me. Well, I come to find out when I get it taken out that she didn't put that one in me. She put a different one in me that did have hormones, and she didn't tell me. She did not tell me. She did tell me that she had to put a different type in me, but she knew that the reason I wanted that one specific type was because it didn't have hormones. And she did not tell me that we were changing, type of IUD like that, because I would have said no. And so when I got my IUD in, I had an 8-month-long period from when it got inserted until 8 months. And I went to see my doctor about it multiple times. I had ultrasounds done, like all sorts of stuff to make sure it was lined up properly, and she just said, well, I don't know what's wrong with it. And people kept telling me, well, spotting is normal when you have an IUD. Like, it's consistently normal to spot while you're on an IUD. And I kept telling them, I am not spotting. Like, I know the difference between spotting and an actual period, and I was having an actual period. Like, I was having a full bleed this whole time. And, they wouldn't believe me until I went to get my ultrasound done. And they're like, well, you're definitely bleeding. I'm like, I know I am. That's what I've been saying. And they're like, well, like, they just blew it off. They're like, well, we don't know what's going on, so just go. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so they kept telling me, it's normal. Like, nothing's wrong. Like, it's lined up properly. And so I believed them. So I had my 8-month-long period. And then once it stopped, I didn't have any period for an entire year. And that was wonderful. That was so amazing. So a year later, I ended up having one for 3 months where I was consistently bleeding again. And I was so scared to go see any doctor about it because of what I went through when I was having the 8-month-long one. And I didn't want to talk to them. I didn't want to do the ultrasounds again. I didn't want to hear the same crap over and over that everything was fine. And so I just dealt with it. I was over it. It was close to the wedding at that point. I'm like, I'm getting it out soon anyway. And so that's why I got it out early after the wedding, because I was just so done with it. Yeah, it was not normal spotting or anything like that. It was full bleed. So, when I got it out, I found out she put the wrong one in. That makes me so beyond mad. But there wasn't anything I can do at that point, and that doctor no longer works at that office. I don't see her anymore. I see a different doctor who I like a million times better, so that's good. But where were we? So when I was talking to my doctor about the PCOS, my OBGYN about the PCOS, I was telling her all about this, right? I told her all of it, and she's like, well, it sounds like PCOS, but we need to do blood tests and an ultrasound to confirm. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, we're getting somewhere. Thank you for, talking to me about it and listening to what I have to say, and like for understanding that I know my own body. And so the nurse came in and took a lot of blood. She took a lot of blood. There was like 6 vials, I think, possibly more. I don't remember. There was a lot of blood, like a lot of blood. But they were testing for everything. They did panel after panel and all these individual tests, and they tested for everything under the sun, because she's like, well, if you don't have PCOS, I want to know what's wrong. And so she tested for all these other things too, and I am so grateful for that. And then I had my ultrasound scheduled. They couldn't get me in for an ultrasound for like 2 weeks or something. So I did wait the 2 weeks after the blood test to go get that done. And I had a meeting with my doctor right after the ultrasound so we could talk about all of it together. And so when I went in to get my ultrasound, it was a transvaginal. When I went in, she started looking at my uterus and everything, and she's like, you have a beautiful uterus, like everything looks great, it's not rotated, it's healthy lining, like everything looks great. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, like we're going along nicely. And then she goes to look, or she looked at my cervix, everything looked good again. She goes to look at my ovaries. I don't remember which one she did first, but in each one there was more than 20, 30, so many cysts along the edge of my ovary and in the middle of it, and it looked bad. It looked so bad. There were so many cysts. And so I'm already like almost in a panic attack. Like I knew this is what was going on, but I'm like, I didn't think it would look that bad, you know? Like you never think it's as bad as it is. And I'm like, okay, well, and then the ultrasound tech asked me the question that my friend got asked. She's like, have you ever been diagnosed with PCOS? And I'm like, no, I have not, but that's why I'm here. And so she goes to look at the other ovary, and there's even more cysts, and it just looks even worse than the last one. And I'm just stuck in this reality. Like, there's no doubt in my mind now. Not a single freaking doubt in my mind that I have PCOS now. Like, there's more cysts than I can count. And again, I had the pearls, the string of pearls around the edge of it, and then I had them like scattered around the middle. And it was like almost completely around the ovary and then scattered throughout the middle too. It wasn't just like half of it or anything like that. I had cyst after cyst after cyst, and there was just so many. And the ultrasound tech was like, look, I can't give a diagnosis, but I'm glad you're here looking for this, because this is what it looks like, is PCOS. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly what that looks like. And so I went back to the waiting room until my appointment with my OB to talk about all the test results. I just broke down crying. I knew I had it. I've never been regular. I've always known something was wrong. I just never had a name for it. I never knew. I never even thought to get tested for something wrong, but I always knew something was wrong. And now I had my answer. And so I just broke down. And then I get called in to talk to my OB. And normally she comes in to the office super happy, asking, you know, how I'm doing, what's new. Like, she's a chatty doctor, and I love her so much. But this time she walks in, not a smile on her face. And she sits down and she's like, so, we have the test results back. And I'm like, yeah, we have them back. Like, I've been looking at some of them because I can see like the blood tests, you know, in the app online. I'm like, yep. And by the way, I was researching all of them as they came in, and almost all of them were normal, but there were a few that went along with PCOS that were not normal. Crazy. And so we went over all the tests, and she agreed. She's like, look, a bunch of these look great. And then we have testosterone here. We have the other one. I don't remember which one it was. But they're elevated, or, they're not correct. And so, we have PCOS. And she's like, yeah, your ultrasound confirmed that even more. And she goes, there's 3 boxes there's 3 boxes. We have to check at least 2 of them to diagnose a patient with PCOS. One of them, of course, is polycystic ovaries. One of them is irregular periods, and the third is a hormone imbalance. You only have to check 2 to get a diagnosis. And I checked all 3. I have irregular periods all my life. We now have blood tests confirming I have hormone imbalance. And we have the ultrasound confirming my polycystic ovaries. So, she keeps telling me about it, and she's like, this is what we expected. Like, we're okay. Like, we can get through this. We're gonna get you pregnant. Like, it's all right. I'm like, all right. Like, so I'm starting to calm down, all is good. And then we started talking about meds, and she's like, there's a bunch of different options, but here's where I want you to start if you're okay with it. And she prescribed me metformin, which is what I told you is for insulin resistance. But she said it also helps with testosterone, and it just boosts your fertility already. And I'm like, that's great. That's fantastic. Let's get on that. And it just helps with PCOS as a whole. It's not just for insulin resistance. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And then she's like, I'm going to prescribe you Provera to start your periods. I'm like, okay. So I have been doing that for about 6 months now. Metformin once daily, and then Provera I take if my cycles get to 30 something days. I start taking Provera for a few days, and then a few days later my cycle's supposed to start, and it works fine and dandy doing that. I also started on a bunch of different vitamins. Of course, I've been on prenatals this whole time, but I also started on magnesium and fish oil. So I have a lot of pills. I have a pill organizer. And I started taking or drinking 2 cups of spearmint tea every day. I hate it, but it's been proven multiple times to lower testosterone. And so I took it twice daily, and it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. I suggested it to a lot of people that I found that were dealing with PCOS, and it worked for them. Every single one of them that I told them about, it did that for them. And they sent me pictures of their positive ovulation tests, and some of them are announcing pregnancies now. But it didn't work for me. So after a few months or so, since I went a few cycles of just trying to get my body used to doing the pills and everything, and so after about 3 cycles, I decided I wanted to start tracking ovulation. Or I think it was after 2 cycles of doing just the pills, I wanted to start tracking ovulation because we still weren't getting pregnant. And I checked twice every day, at least, and taking an ovulation test. I spent more money than I care to admit on ovulation tests. And I just got the cheapies, but it was still a lot. And I never got one single positive ovulation test. Not one. I didn't even get close. I didn't even get a dark line. I got a line because, you have to have, everyone has that hormone in their body, and so you will always get a line on an ovulation test. I always got my line. I didn't get a dark line. I never even got close to a dark line. It was always just faint. It was never close to positive. I did some of the smiley face tests, and I never even got the blinky. Like, I just did not ovulate. And so after 2 cycles of testing for ovulation, I called my doctor and I'm like, hey, I want to try something different. I want to try Clomid. So I told her I wanted to try Clomid, and she's like, hey, I can't prescribe this without talking to you first. So we make an appointment. I go in, and she just tells me how much she hates Clomid and that a lot of doctors won't even prescribe it right now anymore, primarily because it does raise the risk of conceiving multiples. And she said a lot of things that went against my ethics and her ethics, that if I conceived for more, that, some people would think it would be a good idea to do. And it just really turned me off it. She told me a lot of other things, all things I knew. I did know them. I did all my research on this drug before I went in to talk to her about it, before I even called her to tell her I wanted to go on it. But the way she said it, it just broke my heart. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. And so she told me about this different drug that does the same thing, but does not raise the risk of multiples. And that's called Femara or Letrozole. It's the same thing, just 2 different names. And she told me, she's like, I'd much rather you go on that. I used to prescribe it all the time when I worked at this other hospital, and I'd much rather you go on that. I'm like, great, let's do it. Let's go on that one instead. And she's like, well, I can't actually prescribe it to you. I'm like, well, why are you suggesting it then? Like, if you can't give it to me. And she's like, no, I could at the other hospital I worked at, or her residency or whatever, but I can't do it here. And it's because it's a cancer drug. Its off-brand use is to make women ovulate, but initially it's FDA approved for breast cancer chemo treatment. And so she can't prescribe it to me because it's a cancer drug. And so she's like, you have to go to a fertility clinic to get it done. I'm like, okay. So now we're being sent to a specialist. When you hear specialist, you just see dollar signs, or at least I do, because it sounds so expensive. And so I went home, I talked to my husband about it, and he thought the same thing, like, yeah, we gotta do letrozole then, like, we're not taking all those risks for the Clomid and all that, we gotta do the letrozole. I'm like, okay. So I called her and asked her what clinic she suggests, and she gave me 2 options of ones that she really, really likes. And I called my insurance, found out which one they, which one I have benefits for, and I called and made an appointment with the one I really like. And I was lucky enough that the first one available in a time we could make it was the owner and the founder of the clinic we're going to, and he's just amazing. I did so much research on him before our appointment, and he is just amazing. We had our appointment last week, we had it this week, but this video is getting really, really long, so I'm gonna save that for another video. We have more appointments coming up with him, and so I'll just make that one whole video talking about all those appointments. But yeah, thank you for listening to me ramble about our infertility journey. I know I need to learn to say less, smile more. So I will do that in the next video, and I'm sorry I'm so panicky and weird when I talk. This is entirely new for me, but thank you for listening this long. Wish me luck. We could be pregnant soon. I'm not gonna say how soon. I'll save that for the next video. But yeah, hopefully this helps someone. Let me know. Alright, bye guys.